And that's the way we're going to get started.
Not always the way we plan. Hi, Kerri.
Hi, Julie. All right. This is our inaugural podcast for Nurses Unscripted.
And if you think that it's not quite planned, it's not, because it is unscripted. So we are starting each time without exactly quite a plan.
Sometimes that's how it works out best, at least for me.
Yep. And that's how it is sometimes with your nursing career. In the kind of nursing we've been in, you walk in and you do not know what's going to happen any day. So that's how it's always been for us.
For sure. I know we'll talk a little bit about how we got started, but for sure, I never thought that I would end up where I am today in my nursing career. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
So Julie, tell me, how did you decide to become a nurse?
Well, that is an interesting question. I actually didn't initially decide to be a nurse. I always liked thrills and adventure, and trying to save people's life was exactly that way. So I started out as an EMT, actually, because I liked riding on the ambulance, and I liked never knowing what I was going to get. And so I began in Texas. Well, I actually began as a high-angle rescue EMT in Idaho. So it was trying to catch people off the side of cliffs and then save them. And that was fun.
Are you sure you weren't an ER nurse? I mean, we consider ourselves adrenaline junkies, and that kind of sounds like you.
Well, that's why I thought I was going to be an ER nurse, but that's not where I ended up.
I know. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So after doing that, I ended up in Texas, and I became an intermediate EMT, where there's different levels where they let you do more and more and more. And I got to do more invasive things than you learn to stuff needles into people's bones and to intubate them and put the breathing tube down their throat. So I kind of liked, well, unfortunately, a lot of people, there's this myth that you can save a lot of people. And especially back in the 90s and early 2000s, if you had a cardiac arrest in the field and people had to do CPR, you were pretty much done. You're dead. You're a goner. But we did it a lot. So I had a good time with that, but car accidents were fun. I always this is why I thought I was going to be an ER nurse. Mm-hmm. Trauma was fun. Cutting people out of cars, that was fun. I was a volunteer firefighter for a while. That was fun. So I was definitely an adrenaline junkie. But when it came time to do my nursing career, I actually fell into it mostly because I had gotten divorced and I had two very small children. And I thought, well, I like medicine and I need a career where I can always find a job and get paid well. And that is nursing. So I started my nursing career when I was in my 30s, actually. I had bounced around a lot and married someone in the military. So I went to nursing school at the UW-Madison. I'd actually moved back here after living all over the country. And I finished my nursing career. And then I joined the Army Nurse Corps. Did you know that?
I did not.
I know.
So how long were you in the Nurse Corps for?
Not very long. You know why?
You hurt yourself?
I hurt myself. Guess what?
That sounds like my Julie.
Yeah. I broke my leg jumping out of a Humvee with all my battle rattle on. And I ripped some ligaments, and I ended up resigning my commission and coming back. And I was very, very unhappy. But since I had a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old, and it was the beginning of the Afghanistan war, it might have been for the best in the end.
Yeah.
And
you want to leave those babies momless?
Probably not.
No.
So I ended up out in Tucson then, from Texas, from Wisconsin to Tucson, or to Arizona. What the heck? Wisconsin, Texas, then out to Arizona. And that's where the decision came. I interviewed in the ER and I interviewed in the ICU. And I was sure that I was going to go ER because I, at that point, had wanted to become a flight nurse. Obviously, can you see that being my choice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, flight
Adrenaline
nurse.
junkie.
Adrenaline junkie, yeah. And so I thought, okay, ER's got to be the way. But when I interviewed, they had a program through my ICU that was called a preceptorship. And that's where they basically give you an education. I mean, when you get a nursing education, you get a good education, but you do not get the kind of education you need to go out and be a nurse on the floor. And some places, no.
You really need a good preceptorship in order to be a confident and competent nurse.
Yeah. So it's like your nursing school is sort of like your pre-nursing education. And then your preceptorship teaches you to be, you're either going to be a good nurse or you're going to be a scary nurse for quite some time.
Don't be a scary nurse.
Don't be a scary nurse.
Be a scary nurse.
You better hope if you're ever in the hospital, you might just want to say, hey, where'd you get your preceptorship at? How long was it?
How much education have you had?
Yeah. You really don't care where they went to nursing school.
Maybe.
It's a good point. Maybe. I don't know.
Just saying.
We have some weird questions you might ask people that would freak your nurses out. So the preceptorship in the ICU was fantastic. It was like 6 months long, and half of the day was school, and half of the day, or the rest of the time in our week, was working with nurses on the floor. And my ICU was a blast because we were in a poor hospital. And so we got a lot of very, very sick people. And we took every single kind of patient except for very fresh traumas and people with open hearts. So I learned to work with people who were having heart attacks, people who were had been laying in the desert for days and they were incredibly sick and muscle breakdown, people who had drains in their head. So I got neuro. I became competent in every single kind of nursing, and that led me off to my career.
Yeah, that generalist is really a good place to be. The first spot that I started into was an ICU, and it was a smaller hospital. So we were very general, just like you. We took everything except for, like you said, open hearts. We didn't do a whole lot of neurosurgery until the end of my time there. So we got to see a lot of different things, which was awesome because it got me a good start. For me, I distinctly remember my grandma telling me when I was probably 10, I'm guessing, that she used to like me to give her neck massages. And so I'd massage her neck and she's like, oh, you've got such good hands. You need to be a nurse someday. I went to my mom crying that night and I said, please do not make me be a nurse. I'm not going to do it. I'm not touching people. I'm not putting needles in people. I'm not doing it. And she's like, it's okay. You don't have to. And all through school, I thought I was going to go into psychology or mental health. And then when I graduated, I was like, PT, I'm going to do PT. I want to be a physical therapist. Well, if you know anything about being in physical therapy school, you have to be, at least where I went, you had to be like the perfect student, perfect grades, and be a well-rounded student. And quite frankly, I was just happy to be out of my mom's house. So I was not the perfect student on my first or second year.
Shocking.
I know. But during that time, I worked as a CNA and I did home health. And I found that I really did like helping people. And I liked that one-on-one interaction and I liked working with the families. And it just kind of became a natural path for me to then find my way into nursing. And I wanted ER right from the beginning. But when I got hired on, because my background as a CNA, I worked in mental health, and then I went into the neuro ICU at Frederick Hospital, which was amazing.
Really?
Yes. It was
That's
amazing experience.
where I ended up working, was the neuro ICU, but at the UW.
Really?
Madison, yeah.
I really liked it. But I didn't want to specialized in my beginning of my career. So when I graduated, I'm like, put me anywhere. Just hire me at this hospital because this is where I want to work. And they're like, well, we really want to try a new grad in the ICU. I'm like, don't you want to drive me on the floor first? And they're like, no, we really want to try you in the ICU because you've had this ICU background. So I did. And I really loved it. It was a great experience. I got to learn a ton. But I was working third shift and I didn't have daycare on the day shift. And when I ended up having a baby, and they said, figure it out. If you have to stay late, you gotta be able to work double shifts if you need to. And that just didn't work for my husband and I. So I ended up switching to the ER, which was my passion. And they were willing to accommodate me to just working PMs. And that's kind of where I've spent the majority of my career since then. So,
yeah. So there's there's always this joking, but not joking about how ER and ICU have this giant competition where we hate each other, but that's not necessarily always true. There is some truth to that because I know one of the things that we say I know one of the things you say about us is they want to get rid of their patients. So they're all ready. They think that they've got them stabilized and they're like, why can't I get a bed in the ICU? They think they were holding their beds. They've got to have a bed ready. And we're like, we don't really have a bed ready. It hasn't been cleaned yet, whatever. And so you guys are mad.
Well, you just like your patients with a neat little bow on it. You want everything done, everything perfect, and then you want it sent to you. So all you have to do is tuck them in nice and neat, give them a little kiss on the forehead, and off you go.
I prefer they have a blood pressure, and if they need to be intubated, that you intubate them already. I mean, when you send them up crashing, and then we have to do like a crash intubation as they're rolling down the hallway, I don't like that.
You said you liked excitement.
I do, but I don't like it when you're in a place with a resident. I mean, it was great when I was at the hospital in Arizona, and we had intensivists because they were kind of like always there.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing: do not get sick in July, because that's when the residents turn over if you're in a teaching hospital. So in July,
don't get sick.
In August, even then, because all the baby residents are there and they're in charge and they're like, they know nothing. They haven't learned anything yet. The one thing they've learned is they think that they're smart and they don't ask the nurses yet. Now, by 4 or 5 months in, they realize that they're a hot mess and they start trusting the nurses. Yes. So then when the nurses tell them, don't order that, why don't you get some Levofed and fix the blood pressure, stop it, you need more fluid, then they start to listen a little bit. I think I jumped topics. We were talking about ER and ICU.
It's unscripted.
It is unscripted.
But
we would have gotten along fine because, I mean, if she sent me a patient that was still hemorrhaging and ugly and the lines were all a mess, I'd have said, I got it. But then other nurses are more like, it depends on where you trained, because a lot of them train in one specialty. And so if you've always trained in neuro ICU and you only are good with neuro, and somebody like hurt their head, but they happen to also, not have a blood pressure or they're bleeding somewhere, then the people are like, I can only fix the head. I don't know what to do about the rest.
Which is why my opinion is that most nurses need to start out in some form of a general floor, whether that's a general medical, general ICU, general something, so that you get that well-rounded background. And, there's arguments both ways. So my career now has changed for reasons we'll talk about in a future podcast, I'm sure. But now I teach. So I am teaching pediatrics. And so there are people that will argue, well, I only really want to do maternal health. So that's where I want to start. I want to start an OB floor. L&D is my thing. I love it. I want to be there. And that's fine. But then realize that it's going to be very hard for you to switch gears later in your career.
That and your OB patients, they have strokes.
What? You mean they can have something besides a baby?
They can. Imagine that. Especially here in America, where our maternal fetal death rate is shockingly high.
Especially for the quality of care that we should have. Yeah,
it is. So, I mean, you may not know that, but actually a fair number of women die in childbirth or have things like, because that was horrible. When we would get a mother over in the neuro ICU who had stroked out and now was brain dead, but still had like the baby in her, or not cool. Lots of things can happen. Bleeding to death. And so if you don't know how to handle the bleeding to death part, but you're just there for the cute little baby, you have to have a big picture. We had a lot of new grads that came straight into the neuro ICU and they only trained in neuro ICU. But here's the other fun part. When you're a nurse, you get floated. And most nurses hate that word. It's like the evil word. You come in and you hear the word float. And that means that you're going to get sent to another unit where you're then going to be under some other doctors. Like, you don't know the doctors, you don't know the protocols, you don't know where the things are. And all of a sudden you're treating burn patients, or you're treating trauma patients, or you're treating cardiac patients who've had heart attacks. And you're going, but I only know the brain. It doesn't work very well. But here's a weird thing. Let me ask, do you like floating?
You know, I actually didn't mind it because I had that general background and I like not knowing what's coming through the door.
Yep.
So by floating, it was giving me that opportunity. Now, if you would have put me in labor and delivery and told me that I had to go in and help with the delivery, probably wouldn't have gone that well.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I have only helped with one delivery my whole life. I was probably like 8.5 months pregnant with Nate, my son, and I had never seen a delivery, even though I went through nursing school. And I got a call from a frantic father that says, we are on our way in. It's our 5th child. And my wife is going to be pushing this baby out any minute. And I was like, all right, I'll meet you at the door with a wheelchair. And I swear I turned to my colleagues and I'm like, I have never seen a birth before, but I'm going to see this baby be born. And they're like, you can't sit up there all night, Kerri. You have to be back here to work. I'm like, okay, but I'm going to see this baby born. So I went and got her. I'm pushing her down. She looks like she's in active labor. We get in the elevator and she starts making this sound like she's pushing. And I said, do not push. And she goes, I'm pushing and you can't stop me. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, please help, get me to the, because I'd never delivered a baby before. And here we are in an elevator.
Were you loved?
Oh gosh, no. And the father's parking
That
the
was
car.
That was poor planning.
It was
Kerri.
poor planning. I was young. I was naive. Father's parking the car. It's me and mom in the car by ourselves, or in the elevator. So we get up there, we take her in the room, and the nurse is like, all right, you're going to have to help me. I'm like, yay. So she's getting her pants off, getting her in the bed, getting her in position. She goes, can you turn around, hand that? Never mind, turn around and her. I barely got the gloves on, turned around. The woman pushed once and that baby popped right out. I was like, yes, I could be an L&D nurse if everyone went like this. And then I cursed her the entire time I was in delivery with my son because it did not go like that. I was like, one push and you're out. I don't like you, lady.
That's how my son was born.
Shut up. Yeah. Both my labors over 20 plus hours.
My first one was like that. Yeah.
But you see their cute little faces.
Yeah.
And it's all better. But yeah, if you would have put me on labor and delivery when you floated me, I mean, I could have done vitals. I could have peeked at the babies. I could have rocked them, held them.
They generally don't do that. They kind of float you within your line. So an ICU tends to float to other units where people are on monitors. But I love floating. As a matter of fact, in my career very early on, I started what's called an agency nurse. So I would go to other hospitals and just pick up shifts working in other ICUs and other units. And then I became a travel nurse where I would just take an assignment and you go to another hospital somewhere in the country and they throw you to the wolves. They're kind of like, here's 2 or 3 days of orientation.
If you're lucky.
Here's how to use our computer. Here's our supply room. Go forth and don't kill someone. And most people just, the idea of it terrorizes them. But I really enjoyed being able to see the country with my kids and travel around with them, go lots of different places. I worked in some horrific hospitals. I will tell you that. Like I would stay there for 3 months the whole time going, thank God I don't have to work here long term, but I kept my people alive. No one ever died. This was an interesting experience, and now I will move forward. But I then eventually when I came back and worked here in Wisconsin and at the UW, I joined the float pool, which those of us in the float pool are a unique bunch, but we really enjoyed coming to work every day, and you never know where you're going to go. It could be virtually, for the ICU nurses, any unit in the hospital that had people on a monitor. And I liked not knowing what I was going to get and having variety because I didn't like having the same patient every day. And I don't really like it when my patients talk to me. I like the families, but if they have to, I have to feed them pills one at a time, that is not the kind of nursing I want to do.
Yeah. I like the fact when you're in a float pool too, that you don't get into the politics of any specific department.
That's exactly it. It's kind of like, that's like travel nursing. Not my problem.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't have to get into all the committees and all the work for the floor. And not that I don't like helping, but sometimes some of that committee stuff gets in the way of what I want to do, which is take care of the patients. But you know that I did a little bit of travel nursing?
I didn't.
So I have taken students to Bethel, Alaska, 3 times now, I think. And the second time that we went, my colleague and I met with the human resource person. She's fabulous. And she asked me a few times, please come back and work over the summer. And I was like, well, I really don't want to give up my entire summer because that's my time off, right? And if I did 12 weeks, that would almost be like over my summer break. And she said, that's okay. Come for whatever you can. So the first year I did 4 weeks, and then I came back the next year and did 6 weeks. And it was like such a different and unique experience because we did work with a highly Native Alaskan population. And our hospital, it treats people in an area the size of the state of Oregon. So
that'd be Oregon.
You call it whatever you want. But there are so many tribes in this area, but they don't have their own hospitals and things. So they would have one person in each area or in some of the areas where they have like a health aide that has some degree of training. And I give them a lot of credit because they get, only so much training, and then they have to be the end all be all for these people unless they're critical. So they would be really critical in their area where they lived, by their village. And then they would have to get flighted to us or come by boat or come by what they call snow machine. And we would see people coming in with a heart attack, and we wouldn't visibly see them for 4, 5, 6 hours sometimes. And so it was a really unique experience. And, if I could swing it where it was possible with my work schedule and with my home life to be able to leave for 12 weeks, I would love to go back for a full 12-week rotation because it was a really cool experience.
That sounds fun.
It was neat. It was hard. I'm not going to lie. There was parts of it that were hard because you're very rural. You're very secluded. There's not much to do but work. But let's be frank, the money was really nice because that's all you did was work. So all you did is sit there and earn the money, right? So, but we did get to go. Last time I went, I had a friend of mine go with me, and we took a weekend and went fishing. Have you ever been deep sea fishing before?
I have been. No, I have. That's on my bucket list because I love to fish in the ocean, but I've not been deep sea fishing.
It was pretty amazing. Not only did we catch halibut and I can't remember the name of the fish right now. And we did catch cod, but my friend caught an octopus.
Nice.
That was so cool. And then they're like, oh, we're just going to use it for bait. And we looked at each other like, but we kind of want to take it home. And so we did. We brought the tentacles home, and my husband ceviche'd them, and they turned out pretty awesome. So
nice.
Going to other states and other places, make sure that if you do that as a travel nurse, that you take advantage and do some of the fun things in the area too. Don't just work.
Yep.
Money's great, but experience life.
That was what we did because I was homeschooling my kids and traveling with them. And so I went to states where there were things to do there that would fit in with school or fit in with our lifestyle. And we took advantage of that. Did you know that I was a summer camp nurse?
I didn't.
Yes. So
do tell.
For those years that I was traveling, what I would do is I would spend the school year working as an ICU nurse. And then during the summer, you can get a very poor paying job to work at a summer camp. But we went to some very nice summer camps. And then for working there, you make a little bit of money, you get free room and board, and your kids get to go to camp for free. So you can get them in for a 12-week camp, and they get to live in the bunks and do everything the other kids do. And that's worth, for the two of them, $30,000 sometimes.
What kind of camp did you work at?
So I worked at a sports and arts camp in Pennsylvania. Cool. I worked at an animal science camp in Missouri. I worked at a wilderness tripping camp in Bemidji, Minnesota. I worked at, I'm missing one. Oh, I just worked at a general, it wasn't really there was no real theme to it in Maine, one summer. Those were most of them. Kids had a really good time. And as a nurse, you give meds and you put Band-Aids on boo-boos and you make kids feel not homesick. So it was fun, and you get to take part in the activities at the camp. And one of the camps had circus. So I learned to do the high flying trapeze.
Shut up. Really?
For real.
Oh my God. I learned something new about you every time I talk to you. Actually, when I was in college.
You wanted to be a circus performer?
No.
Oh.
But I really didn't want to go home over the summers. And I can't remember. I think it was my second summer after college. I ended up working at a summer camp as well.
Did you?
I worked at a summer camp for developmentally disabled people. and it's actually pretty close to where I live now. And so I got to be a camp counselor for them. And we had a lot of people with seizure disorders. So we got to take care of a lot of seizure patients.
Oh, nice. So you were medical.
Tube feedings, people who had paralysis, all kinds of things. And so that was even before I decided to become a nurse. So I think that kind of helped reiterate too the fact that maybe that was the direction I needed to go in. But yeah, it was kind of fun and kind of a weird coincidence that we've both done that. Yeah. It's amazing. Julie and I actually have only met each other, 3 months ago, maybe?
Yeah, not even.
And then we started working together in our business probably 6 weeks ago, maybe 8 weeks ago. And in doing so, we have found out that we are basically one and the same person.
Yep.
Sorry, husband and Mike, our fiance. But they're so much alike that it's a little crazy down to the colors that we like. And
I came in her house and she painted it the same color I painted my house, like exactly hue, shade. I mean, it is hilarious. We are like the same woman. She's my work wife. So
very fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So let's talk about where we're at now and how we got to where we're at now, because we're also incredibly similar in where we're at now in that we're both defective.
Well, maybe should we just talk about our business for now and then end it and then do another one on how we got to why we're
sure. We're going to skip past that whole part and we're going to jump forward to where we're at now and why we're and we'll just give you the what we're doing now. That's a good plan.
I know.
I like to listen to her sometimes, or at least I let her think that I'm listening to her.
So we will give you that part in another one. But so probably May of this year, maybe April, my sister actually came to me and asked me to try some products from a company that she liked, and then she was going to start working for. And I tend to take things to the next level. And when I agreed to join her, I joined a network marketing company to learn how to do it online as correctly as I could. And so I spent the money and I went online and I started taking the classes. And that's where Julie came in.
Yep. And so I think very shortly after you joined the same educational business program online, and we were all in. We're going to learn how to do this online, both of us, because we don't have really a face-to-face opportunity to learn how to, or to really do our business in the offline world. And we just thought that online was the way to do it. And after a fairly short period of time, I talked to Kerri and I said, hey, you know what? I think that we would make great business partners. And would you join my team? And at first she was a little hesitant.
Well, but you have to realize that in order to become a team, a true team, I had to switch network marketing companies.
And that was very hard because she was very tied to her company because
of my sister.
She was with her sister.
So the company itself is not a bad company. If you know where I worked before, this is not a reflection on them in any way, shape, or form. But some of the products didn't work for me personally. And so I had a hard time encouraging people to take products that I felt I couldn't stand behind. And as a nurse and as what I considered myself to be a holistic nurse, I didn't feel like that was an avenue that I could pursue to continue on with in a way to talk people into products that I felt didn't work for me. So how do I know it's going to work for somebody else? And so when Julie said that, do you feel like you can stand behind the products? I was like, well, quite frankly, they're not giving me exactly what I'm looking for. And so that's kind of when we decided that I would switch companies and that we would join forces. So we are now on the same team. We now work with the same network marketing company. And so far,
we're unstoppable.
We're working it. Yep. And we are really enjoying it. So we, in the future, will be bringing you some products, hopefully one per episode, just so you can kind of get a peek at what we're selling and what we're interested in. But that'll just be a very small part of our podcast. So don't not jump in because of that.
Yep.
So I feel like we have a lot to share and a lot of fun things. And we do have a lot of people planned for future podcasts in which we're going to bring in guests and talk to them. unfortunately, Julie and I won't always get to sit next to each other when we are doing these, but it was great that today we were able to be side by side and do our first podcast live together.
So we hope you had a good time, because we had a good time and we like hanging out. And we think we're funny, so hopefully you think you're funny too.
All right. Let's